Imagine an FBI raid happening right on your street. You peek out your window and you see agents in full-on hazmat gear just swarming your neighbor's house. It sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? But this was the reality in a Las Vegas suburb. And a single tip led investigators to something that, frankly, is deeply disturbing. So what exactly did they find in there?
Well, it all started with a smell. A house cleaner who was hired to work on the property described this foul, stagnant odor coming out of the garage. It was so bad that both she and a handyman who went inside became, and these are their words, deathly ill. That was the first major red flag that whatever was inside this totally normal-looking house was seriously, dangerously wrong.
And just so we're crystal clear, this wasn't some case of bad plumbing or a spilled chemical. Nope. What the FBI found was a fully operational, totally illegal biological laboratory, and it was hidden in plain sight, operating right next door to families who had absolutely no idea.
Okay, so let's dive into part one, the lab in Las Vegas. On the first weekend of February, acting on that tip from the cleaner, federal agents and local police descended on this home. And what they discovered inside that locked garage, well, it set off alarm bells that went all the way to Washington, D.C.
This is what they found inside. Over 1,000 biological samples. 1,000 vials filled with who knows what. All of them immediately rushed for urgent analysis. Just let that number sink in for a second. The sheer scale of it is it's hard to wrap your head around. And just look at the equipment here. This is not some hobbyist chemistry set. We're talking about a professional biosafety hood, a centrifuge, specialized refrigerators. This is serious, professional-grade stuff. You add to that all the chemicals, the medical waste, and nearly 1,000 mice, some alive, some dead. And what you've got is an incredibly dangerous operation.
And this right here really drives home just how immediate the danger was. This wasn't some kind of abstract threat for the future. No, it was active. Two regular people, just trying to do their jobs, got seriously hurt. They said they literally could not get out of bed after being exposed. It's a pretty stark reminder of the very real, very human cost here.
So that brings us to Section 2, the California connection. Because as the investigators started digging, they realized something unsettling. The Las Vegas lab, it wasn't a one-off. They'd seen this before. It was part of a pattern that led them straight to a similar case in California and to one person connecting both of them.
And this is him, Jia Beizhu, a Chinese national who also goes by David He. The house in Las Vegas, it's registered to his company. And that name was already flashing on the FBI's radar. Why? Because just the year before, in 2023, he was arrested for running an almost identical illegal lab.
And when you put the two cases side by side like this, the parallels are they're impossible to ignore. Same guy, Jia Beizhu, thousands of biological samples, the same kind of sophisticated equipment, even the genetically engineered mice. This wasn't a copycat. The evidence suggests this was just him picking up where he left off, in a brand new city.
So what are we talking about here? What was actually in these labs? To get a sense of the danger in Vegas, you just have to look at what they confirmed was in his California lab. We're talking vials labeled with things like HIV and tuberculosis, the deadliest form of malaria, and, maybe the most chilling part, mice that were genetically engineered to carry COVID-19.
Which leads us to Section 3, an alleged CCP network. Because this is where the story goes from a dangerous criminal to something potentially much, much bigger. According to a U.S. House Committee report, Jia Beizhu isn't just some lone wolf. They allege he is part of a much larger state-sponsored network. That very same congressional report describes Zhu as a fugitive who got into the U.S. illegally after he apparently stole millions in American intellectual property. And it explicitly says he has links to military-civil fusion entities. That's a Chinese government strategy to basically merge civilian research with military ambitions. The report also says he was a top official at a state-controlled company in China.
Now, check this out. While he was in federal custody for that first lad, Jia Beizhu made 467 phone calls. 467. So, who in the world was he talking to?
Well, the phone records gave them the answer. He was allegedly coordinating his operations from prison, talking constantly with his property manager. I mean, think about that. It suggests this is a network so sophisticated that arresting one guy doesn't even stop it. The operation just keeps on going.
So, Section 4, systemic failures. All of this just begs a massive question. How could this even happen?
How can not one, but at least two sophisticated and illegal biolabs operate for years without anyone noticing? The report argues this points to a massive systemic failure in our security.
The Fresno County Sheriff, John Zanoni, who dealt with that first lab, he put it very bluntly. He said this is putting national security at risk for one simple reason. Nobody knows about them. I mean, think about it. Both of these labs were found by pure chance. A code enforcement officer in one case, a house cleaner in the other. Not by any kind of intelligence operation.
The investigative report that all this information is based on, it goes even further. It makes the argument that these labs are the direct result of U.S. policy going back decades, a policy that the report claims has consistently put corporate profits from trade with China ahead of our own national security. And this, the report says, created the exact holes in the system that are now being exploited.
And that brings us to the final section, a national security wake-up call. The report basically concludes that this whole situation has to be a massive wake-up call. The point isn't just about cleaning up these two labs. It's about fixing the system so a third or a fourth or a 10th one doesn't pop up. So what happens now?
The report lays out 4 big recommendations. First, launch a huge nationwide search for any other labs like these. Second, get serious about enforcing existing border and immigration laws. Third, it says we need to fundamentally rethink our entire economic relationship with China. And finally, to shift our national priority away from corporate profits and back to national security.
And the report's final conclusion is pretty chilling. It says these aren't just isolated crimes. When you look at the sophistication, the dangerous materials, and the alleged connections to a foreign state, the report views these as potential acts of war being carried out quietly inside American suburbs. Which leaves us with the final, really unsettling question that this whole investigation raises. If these two labs were only found by accident, how many more of these shadow labs are out there right now operating completely under the radar?